Okay, let's do this. All right, that's almost exactly as I predicted.
Shadowversity.
This video is sponsored by HelloFresh, a product that I have personally used well before they've ever sponsored me. It is the best meal delivery service that I've ever used, with heaps of variety, delicious meals, and really nutritious. So go to HelloFresh.com and use my code Shadowversity14 to get 14 free meals, including free shipping. So that is a phenomenal deal. You're not losing anything by giving it a try, and like me, when you give it a try, you'll find out how worthwhile it is and how delicious it is. My whole family has enjoyed HelloFresh for many years. In fact, we can see them enjoying it right now.
Today, we're cooking HelloFresh.
HelloFresh!
HelloFresh with Shad's family.
Sponsored by HelloFresh.
Sponsored by HelloFresh. Shad's away.
I love HelloFresh.
Shad's away in Canada right now, so we're gonna cook some food in the Shadlands. Do you like steak?
Yeah!
You excited, Thunder Warrior? Look at him. Look at how happy he is.
They offer such a wide variety of quick meal options like 20-minute dinners or oven-ready pizzas. They have so many recipes to choose from each week, which gives you huge variety and helps you break out of your own recipe rut, which is exactly what my family found we often resorted to, just the same old recipes again and again. The average trip to the grocery store takes 41 minutes, and for me it takes a lot longer, but with HelloFresh you can skip those trips and get everything you need to make chef-curated meals, which are delivered right to your door. And with HelloFresh's pre-portioned ingredients, it means that there's far less prep time and less waste as well. It's so easy to give this a try, and in fact, there are free meals available to you. So go to HelloFresh.com and use my code Shadowversity14 to get 14 free meals, including free shipping. Give it a try, you won't be disappointed, and thank you to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video.
Greetings, I'm Shad, and in this episode of Functional Fandom, we're going to be testing a very classic trope in not only just fantasy, but this also appears in so many different movies, and it's a trope of shooting an arrow, but with a rope tied to it for any number of reasons. We got the rope here, and we got the arrow. We're going to legitimately test this because will it even work? Is this actually something that you could probably do? And there are levels of the test. We're going to kind of do stages to see what elements might have more plausibility and what won't. For instance, the first one, we're just going to see if you can even shoot an arrow with a rope tied to it. Because, when I see this, usually the arrow is never affected by the fact that it's got a rope tied to it that is needing to drag behind itself. And so, one, I'm sure you'll be able to shoot at some distance, but how far could you logically shoot an arrow with a rope tied to it? And we're testing this with a proper 100-pound warbow here. In terms of distance that we'll be able to reach, it's actually variable because the most optimal arrow that has a better transferal force from the bow to the arrow are war arrows. Do you see how thick this is? This is nearly ½ an inch thick war arrow right here. If the arrow is too thin, well, it bends. It actually bends and then wobbles ridiculous amounts. And I've tested this, right? And that legitimately affects the distance that even lighter, thinner arrows get shot. So you think, shouldn't this be intuitive, that a lighter arrow shot from a heavier bow will go further? Not necessarily, because what I found when I've shot lighter arrows from this thing, this beast, right, it put so much stress into the arrow that the arrow bends, usually slaps the shaft of the bow because it bends so much. The calibration of the arrow to the bow is completely off, and so the archer's paradox that usually gets the arrow to curve around the bow is completely whacked, and so it hits the shaft as a result, and then it's wobbling through the air, and so the wind resistance slows down the arrow heaps more to the point that a lighter, thinner arrow doesn't shoot actually further than these bigger, thicker ones. So there's that to consider in this. But then the fact is, this is a heavier arrow. And just because it's heavier, it takes more energy to accelerate to shoot further. And so the range of warbows, surprisingly, aren't necessarily greater. Sometimes they are, it's actually a bit of a balance. But then bows that are a little bit lighter, because I've tested this with my 70-pound bow. And my 70-pound bow, shooting arrows that are made for it, can shoot about as far as this 100-pound bow. And you might be thinking, well, what's the point of a warbow then? Well, if it can accelerate a heavier, thicker arrow to the same distance as a lighter one, its momentum is still much greater because it has more mass, all right? Momentum is the combination of mass and velocity. And so if the velocity isn't actually that much greater in the arrow, it's the mass is, which means the momentum of it hitting is going to be far, far greater. Now, I do think a warbow is going to have better chances of accelerating an arrow with a rope tied to it because there's just more power behind it. But as to how effectively, we're going to find out. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So first we're going to test shooting the arrow just with a rope tied to it. And we're trying to make this as like a fair test representation as possible. So we found some great, like it's strong, naturally made, you know, actual rope, okay? But it's very thin rope, very light. And so out of any type of rope, this one should impact the arrow the least because it's so thin and light. But I think this would still hold the weight of a person. This is like really good, strong stuff, okay? Get in close and have a look at, this is some good rope, right? So if this arrow has trouble flying through the air with this type of rope tied to it, imagine how much trouble it would have with a thicker, heavier rope. Okay, and so you can kind of extrapolate and get an idea based on the test that we're going to do. The trope of shooting an arrow with rope tied to it is done in so many movies, right? And it's usually to get it lodged, usually in wood or something, okay? So people legitimately swing from it, get pulled up from it. Sometimes there's a handhold and things. And so the next thing we're going to test, let's go, oh, this is painful. Emotionally painful for me, right? Because we're going to shoot my war arrows into trees. I'm going to shoot it specifically into that one behind me. Because this is the thing, usually when you shoot, like war arrows, right, shot from a war bow have so much mass or so much momentum in them, right, that when they hit something that's wholly resistant, like metal armor, they break and just snap. And the reference, have a look at this test by Todd's Workshop, and these are arrows shot from a 160-pound bow, like really powerful bow, right? And it's shooting against a metal breastplate. Every time it hits the metal breastplate, these arrows break, okay? They're wood, they're not invulnerable. Now, a tree isn't as solid as metal, but there's a good chance that they might break. And so this trope could be debunked just by the fact that when you shoot an arrow of appropriate power, because it's the thing, the trope of shooting an arrow with a rope tied to it is usually done in fantasy, usually from a warrior type of person, and we can logically expect the bows in reality should be at least, you know, warbow level strength. Minimum 70-pound, but really like 100-pound is usually the standard people rate. 100 to 120, okay, is the standard warbow range, but they do go up to even 200-pound. And so when you shoot an arrow from a bow of that strength, there's a chance that these arrows won't even survive. They'll just snap, break, when it's shot straight into wood. This is why it's going to be painful, because I'm expecting my arrow. I don't know how many I'll sacrifice to it, maybe only 2 just to get an idea. We're going to shoot him, and pretty close as well, straight into a tree. Now you might say, well, I mean, I'm not sure I'll be able to pull them out. They'll be lodged in so much. But does that mean they'll be lodged in enough to support your own weight? Because one of the tropes is that you shoot an arrow with a rope tied to it to swing across something or to support someone's own weight. It's even done there. And look, I've seen it in movies. I can't remember every single reference, but in terms of just shooting an arrow with a rope, I know it's in Mulan where she's falling off the cliff. She doesn't land into anything, but she shoots it to her friends. And so maybe we could reach that point where just shooting an arrow with a rope we can achieve. But in terms of shooting an arrow into a tree and having it stay there to the point that it's, you know, doing something, another movie comes to mind where they did this is the movie King Arthur. It's not a great movie, but there's a part where the native Britons, okay, Celtic kind of Britons, are fighting against the King Arthur, who are serving the Romans in this movie specifically, and they make a trap for them. And part of the trap is that they shoot these arrows with it's weird vine types ropes into trees to create nets. They just shoot ropes, so much arrows with ropes to it that they create a net barring the path of King Arthur and his on his horse and his friends and stuff. Is that even possible? Will it stick in? Will it break? And if it sticks in, how strongly? All right. That's the intro. That's what we're doing. Let's get to the first test. So part of the issue that we're going to face, which is not addressed in so many movies, is the fact that the likelihood of the rope getting tangled. Because what we want And we see this with like harpoon guns and things. The rope is tied on the gun so specifically that it unravels perfectly evenly as it shoots. But we don't really see this in movies. In movies, it's just assumed that the rope is fine. It's just there and it shoots. Because if this hits like a bit of a knot or something as it launches, and instead of just pulling on a thin strand of rope as it progressively flies into the air, and it needs to pull on a larger clump of rope that's much more heavy like this, that's going to yank the arrow down and stop it in its flight completely. I think that is going to be one of the biggest limitations that we're going to see. And this rope right here is mostly untangled, but it's not perfectly. It's not like it's wrapped on a harpoon rope. But like if this was one of the situations where an adventurer just quickly, rope, tied to arrow, shoot, okay, they don't have time to unravel rope perfectly. And this rope is far less tangled than a lot of ropes would be if you just had it on your person. Granted, it's actually a fairly long one, so I'm going to try and just put it down in a fairly even way to help it unravel gradually as I shoot. And I need to grab one end of it. Now, we might only get one chance at this, because as the rope gets pulled, it might grab a clump, it actually might find a knot just normally, and then if it just pulls it into the sky and messes it up, we could get a massive tangle here, and that might ruin the second follow-up shot. So, going to do what we can, but at least we'll get one more favourable setup for this test. Okay, now the other big thing, or problem with this concept of shooting an arrow with ropes tied to it. Let's say, perfect situation, you can shoot it, the arrow stays attached, it lands in the target, and then you want to swing from it, support your weight on it and everything. Fixing the rope to the arrow in such a way that it wouldn't just rip off the arrow is a big problem. Most people just tie it around, but in actual reality, if you wanted the most secure way for this to be attached, you'd probably need a hole through the arrow and loop the rope through it. But we'll see, because I'm going to wrap this up with a very generous wrapping, okay? We're going to do a pretty big one, which will create a lot of friction and attachment to the rope. So let me just get the right position and start making this knot. All right, so here we have the rope that I've tied to this arrow. Very secure. I don't think it would hold a person, like if you're really pulling on it, but it should be more than enough to pull on this rope. Now, I've unraveled a bit of a length, okay, which shouldn't be an issue. But when we get to this larger pile here, that's where I reckon there's going to be a lot more resistance on the rope that could just pull this arrow's flight to a complete standstill and it'll just drop. Let's find out. Now, if you do happen to see some cows off to the side, don't worry, I'm not angling or aiming towards them. Also, the one on the side there is out of range. I know the range of this bow, these arrows, and so we're perfectly safe and fine here. Because I have a feeling we might only get one shot, I want to do a full draw on this thing. And man, I reckon the rope might even hit the shaft. Whew. So I actually think we might need to push this down here to about there to get the most optimal or most charitable circumstances for this test. Okay. Are we ready? We only might get one shot at this. Okay. Let's do this. All right, that's almost exactly as I predicted. It shot, right? And as soon as it hit a knot over here that couldn't unravel properly, the entire weight of the rest of the rope just pulled the arrow to a complete standstill. And how far did I even get that? Like, let's just compare this with a normal arrow, okay? So let's just shoot a normal arrow to compare distance here. Don't worry, we'll try the test again, but we have already found the biggest flaw with this trope, almost to the point where I'm not sure how plausible it is. But ready? Just this one right here. I don't know how long that far that is, but that was fun. I'm going to shoot another one. It's always fun shooting long range. I enjoy it. I'll try and get a cleaner release because distance is always an interesting thing. I mean, I'm tempted to measure this. I'm expecting maybe 200 paces is the expected distance for, you know, this was in Henry VIII's time. But so I'm thinking, I'm usually short with these arrows and this bow. And so I think that might be 180 paces. We'll see. I'm tempted to measure it. But all right, so have a look. Ready? This is what happened. We just got a tangled mess now of rope. Oh, this is horrible. Like, ugh. This is a mess. I'm wanting to try and untangle as much length as I can now to get a shot where it won't hit a knot and just be dragged down by all this rope together. But look, oh, this is such a mess now. Oh, I have no idea how I'm gonna untangle this. This is horrible. And it was mostly untangled, that was the thing. Like if we just unraveled it like slowly, it wouldn't have caught on anything and we could have unraveled it, but this is a hornet's nest. All right, we've got my measuring wheel here. Let's actually see how far the arrow shot with the most generous circumstances we could get. Really light, thin rope, okay? Completely unspooled, so there was no knots that it would get caught on. And with all that, there was still so much drag on the arrow that it shot, let's have a look, 20.4 meters. Let's compare that to one of the unrestricted shots. So 112 meters to these areas here. And so with just this setup, it's interesting how much further different setups and warbows can shoot, because I know there are other warbows that could easily shoot 200 meters, right? But anyway, we can still do an accurate comparison with the rope compared to these. Same arrows, same bow. 20 meters versus 112. Now, I have shot arrows from that bow up to 150 easy, and so actually we are shooting uphill as well, that'll restrict it. Okay, so we want to try this again. And this time we've unraveled a length of rope. We got to a really bad knot that was almost impossible to unravel any further. And so just with even this, see it lying on the ground, completely unraveled. There should be no real big, pullback with this light rope, just to see how far an arrow will shoot with a shorter piece of rope that's wholly unraveled in the most charitable interpretation of this test as we can do. So let's give it a go. Trying to get a clean release without the rope tangling up. Gosh, honestly, how would people be able to do this with the arrow on the inside? Like seriously, if the arrow's on this side, right, the rope would need to be sliding through. I have to lower it quickly and hopefully it wouldn't get caught on the bow. I think having it on the outside gives it much better chances of not getting tangled. Let's give this a go. That's interesting. Almost the whole length of the rope that we had. This is the end, okay? But wow, did that pull on it. Like, we're not even getting a fifth of the length of a normal shot. All right, so I'm just gonna say 20 meters versus 120, because I can easily hit 120 with these at a good shot without shooting uphill. And so, is that like with a really light rope, even from a warbow, but granted, again, these are heavy arrows, so I think we might get the similar results, even if we shot it from the 70-pound bow. 20 meters, is that the functional, generous distance that you could effectively shoot an arrow with a rope tied to it? Let me just try this one more time, see how far it goes, without it hitting the shaft. I reckon that went further that time. Could you bring me the measuring wheel?
Same distance, I reckon.
You reckon same distance?
Yeah,
well, right here, reset, and let's find out. It's totally the drag on the arrow. Like even a light rope like this, tremendous drag. So this time, 25 meters. Really favorable circumstances.
How much further was that?
5 extra meters.
Oh, okay.
That shot. There's a lot that can impact range of arrows. How clean the release is, all right, the angle, also how much contact it has with the shaft, wind, shooting uphill or downhill, so it all depends. Because we are technically shooting a little uphill. We are at least a meter, if not 2 meters higher than the starting position, and so that could get an extra meter or two from the shot, maybe, and land it on a decent angle. So, you know, I reckon that if you push it, you could probably reach 30 meters. And that's the most generous kind of thing with such a light rope. Even on a war bow. Granted, there are much more powerful war bows that can shoot further. And so, if you're being super generous, really powerful long-range bow, 40 meters? But that is not very far. And that's the thing. In movies and stuff, the arrows are usually never, you know, held back by the rope. I think that is completely debunked already. But still, I want to do the other tests, just to be completely thorough. So now we're going to test if an arrow will even survive being shot into thick, dense wood. This is actually still a more charitable setup because the bark is going to cushion the arrow a decent amount before it really hits the hard parts of the wood. And also, just to show you, see this? That is 20 meters of rope, just 20 meters wrapped up around this arrow. That's how thick it gets, and this is light, thin rope. So even like, I was wondering if you really, you know, think this is a useful thing, you could have pre-spooled arrows with rope ready to go. But even then, it's not going to work because you would need it spooled so specifically that when you shoot it, it will unravel evenly without getting caught and pulling back on the rope. Just like this. And even then, I don't think it's going to be perfect because it needs to pull back so evenly. And it gets one thing, but even then, unspooling from the arrow compared to completely unraveled on the ground will pull back on the arrow more than the tests we did. And so really, the effective distance you're looking at shooting an arrow with rope tied to it is 20 to 40 meters at the most. And 40 is like the most generous of the insanely powerful bow with light, thin string. Okay, let's find out if these arrows will even survive being shot into wood. Oh. I'm gonna lose arrows. All right, let's get close. Like, actually, I wonder if I can even pull it out. I'll probably lose the arrowhead though. Let's see. Hey! Couple of things. One, all right, the arrow survived. Bonus. Mainly, the bark on this is like an inch thick, and so it got cushion in the bark. I didn't even hit the hardwood then. And the penetration was still there. We'll actually measure penetration on the next shot. But the other thing is, oh, actually, there's a bend in this. You can see a bend down the shaft now. I'm not sure if you can see it, but I can see it. If you are intending to shoot an arrow into something for the purpose of holding someone's weight, I was able to just pull it out with my hand. We'll try again. Whoa. All right, we'll come close, have a look. This is really close range. Let's see. Broke. The arrowhead is buried an inch or two right in there, and it's not coming. Goodbye to one arrow. Oh, almost dead center. Let's have a look. So, it looks like shooting into a tree at least, the arrows can survive. I've already seen like arrows shot from a high-powered bow into metal have a very high chance of just snapping. Most of them always do. But into wood, because it seems like there's enough cushioning from the bark, they can survive it. The next test we wanted to do was how much resistance to the pull do they have. Because that's the thing, you shoot into something and it supports your weight. Ooh, okay, this one is, this is almost dead center on the tree. So, how much weight will this hold off? It's already coming loose. There we go. So, I think this has wholly debunked the trope of shooting arrows with ropes tied to them. Not only do they barely even travel far, okay, because the arrow pulls it back, they actually don't sink into the target with enough force to hold it there if it's a tree. If it's bare wood, it can get stuck in it pretty good, but it's not going to support someone's weight. Not even close. There we go. Shooting arrows with ropes tied to them. Busted. Are we just going to start, get rid of the facade? We're copying Mythbusters, but in a more pop culture fantasy thing.
You want to think of a better one, like it's been shatterfied.
It's been shattered on?
Get shat on.
Yeah, it's been shat on. Oh, this trope. It's not true, it doesn't work, okay? But it was a lot of fun to test. Thank you very much for joining us here. I hope to see you on the next video on Shadowversity. So until that time, farewell.